Welcome to Module 4. For this module, we are going to talk a lot about fair use and how to determine if something is indeed a fair use. We're also going to talk about the DMCA, which is the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, its provisions, as well as some unintended consequences that it has caused. We'll also talk about how distance education necessitated the development of the TEACH Act in order to maintain fair use. Because of the limitations on fair use and the requirements for distance education, there needed to be some specific changes so that distance education could use the same materials. As you read in the introduction, fair use is often the justification people state when they have violated the rights of a copyright owner. Fair use does exist, although you will see how murky the waters are in determining if something actually is fair use. Let's look at the part of the U.S. Code that created fair use. The entirety of Title 17 of the U.S. Code is copyright. Let's explore Chapter 1, Section 107 of the Code in more detail. You may want to have a copy of the entire Section 107 in front of you at this point. It is shown on the screen. Section 106 deals with the bundle of rights a copyright owner has. We study them in Module 2. They include the right to reproduce, produce derivative works, distribute copies, perform the work, display the work publicly, or perform the work through audio transmission. Section 106A reaffirms the rights of visual artists to claim authorship of the work they created and to prevent the use of their name in conjunction with works they did not create. So basically this is saying that while copyright owners have these rights which prevent others from copying, using, performing their work without their permission, it is subject to limited use in specific situations. These situations are criticism, comment or review, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. This is all, however, subject to the fair use conditions. Let's look at the categories that are included as possible fair use of protected material and define each of them so you know what each looks like. The reading from the Stanford page also provides more elaboration, so please make sure to take a look at it also. For comment and criticism, let's look at this book review in the New York Times. It's a review of a book called The Children's Crusade. Ann Packer is the author of the book. Katie Kitamura, however, wrote the review. The first paragraph introduces the reader to what the review is about and continues for several paragraphs providing a synopsis of the story. Then, the paragraph beginning with "still" includes several quotes from the book. You can see them in quotation marks. This is what is meant by commentary or criticism. Criticism means that someone's evaluating the product, in this case a book. Criticism can be either positive or negative. Another of the exemptions under fair use is for the purpose of news reporting. Many people believe that any information constitutes news, but this is not true. Consider that news, according to Vudrag of the American Bar Association, defines news as following the guidelines that are on your screen. The important thing to remember is that information does not equal news. If you consider a newspaper, if anybody still reads them print or digital, or a live broadcast of the news, that is what the category of news reporting is. You'll note that the information must be for a legitimate news report on news that is fairly recent. Research and scholarship are two other categories that are provided for. In the first example, I'm going to pretend I'm a researcher, a scholar. I'm studying the effects of viewing photographs on the brainwaves of the viewers. I find photos of a car wreck, a cute puppy, a tsunami victim from the internet. I copy the images to show my participants. I am advancing knowledge by completing my study. So, while I am completing the study, I am researching. After I finish the research and have my findings, this is where scholarship comes in. In the second example, I'm reporting on the results of my research. Scholarship generally is a reporting of research. In the above example, after I completed my study, I wrote up the results for a submission to a scholarly journal. In my explanation of my research, I needed to include the photographs I showed the participants so that my readers would understand the research that I did. This would be another one of the permitted uses under the fair use provisions of copyright law. Note, however, that all of this is subject to the 4 fair use factors that we will be studying shortly. People often consider that any time they are conveying information, it's considered teaching, but that's far from the truth. Okay? Courts have found that nonprofit educational institutions, such as elementary schools, high schools, colleges, universities, are engaging in educational uses of materials when using the works as part of the curriculum. Courts often consider libraries, museums, hospitals, and other nonprofit institutions to be educational institutions when they engage in nonprofit instructional research or scholarly activities for educational purposes. Okay. We're going to cover teachers' use of copyrighted materials more, but please understand that teaching does not equal giving information. Also note that we're talking about nonprofit institutions or government institutions. So the United States Code provides an exemption for others to use work that is copyrighted, and these exemptions often fall into the categories of criticism, commentary, teaching, news reporting. However, not all uses of copyrighted works in criticism, teaching, commentary, news reporting are fair use. This diagram is showing that only some of the uses in these categories constitutes fair use. We're now going to look at the 4 fair use factors to determine if something is fair use. These are the 4 fair use factors that are set forth in the U.S. Code. However, the courts first consider if the use falls into one of the favored use categories that I explained earlier: criticism, news reporting, teaching, etc. However, just because a use falls into one of the favored categories doesn't automatically make any use a fair use. But also, if a use falls outside of the categories, it could still be ruled fair use. Confusing? Gets even more confusing. The discussions for this module require you to evaluate hypothetical cases based on these 4 fair use factors, so a deep understanding of what each of the factors actually means is vital. Please make sure you read both Stanford's fair use pages in the readings as well as the Copyright Office's more info on fair use before you post. The courts will look at whether a work, let's pretend it's an image for the sake of clarity, favors fair use or favors infringement for each of these 4 categories. However, the important thing to remember is that there's no magic number of factors that need to favor fair use in order for the courts to rule fair use. For example, if the courts rule that the use of an image favored fair use on factors 1, 2, 3, and 4, the courts could still rule that the use is infringement. The courts could rule that one of the factors isn't applicable in the case. So you can never truly know if something for sure is fair use until a court decides. If you're using an image, for example, you can state that you have included it under fair use guidelines. But if the issue is taken to court, the court may rule that you've infringed on the rights of the copyright holder. It is important, if claiming fair use of a work, to know what the courts have previously decided in similar cases. You can utilize the website URL that is on the screen to help determine if similar cases were ruled as fair use and the rationale that the judges had on each of those. The website has a great way to search through fair use cases. If you click on Search Cases, you'll get the screen on the right where you can search by category of use. It's updated pretty quickly after an opinion is filed by the court, and I strongly urge you to take a look at it. Advances in technology affected use of copyrighted materials, not just for distance education, though. Because of these advances in technology, it was becoming easier and easier to pirate a copyrighted work. For example, DVD players easily copied DVDs, CD players easily copied CDs. Video cameras were used in theaters to record first-run movies to post on websites. Software was easily copied. Copyright holders were increasingly frustrated with this piracy. They have been building digital rights management into their products, which prevented people from copying and distributing them. However, enterprising individuals and companies developed technologies to circumvent the anti-copying measures. From pressure to reduce the ability to pirate copyrighted goods, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, or DMCA, was passed. There were two main provisions to the DMCA. Circumvention of digital rights management devices, technology, and services all became illegal. And Internet Service Providers, ISPs, would not be held liable if users posted infringing works onto their website, subject to some conditions. Without the safe harbor portion of DMCA, sites such as these would not exist because they, as Internet service providers, would be liable for any infringement by their users. Consider how much of what you see on YouTube is infringing. However, because of Safe Harbor, the ISPs will not be held liable for content posted by users if they promptly take down any work that a copyright holder says is infringing. Without the Safe Harbor provision of the DMCA, social networking sites such as these would not exist, or at least not be as big and easy to use, because the ISP, YouTube for example, would be fighting lawsuits from people whose copyright was infringed. This immunity from prosecution for the infringing works on their users is conditional, however. For example, if I find someone has copied content from my website, perhaps some artwork I've created, and posted it on their Facebook page, I would send a notice of claimed infringement to the owner of the website that is hosting the material. I would include a link to the content on my site and their site. The ISP then would be immune from any prosecution by me, the copyright holder, if they promptly removed the work. That is, they took down the work. If you've ever gotten one of these messages on YouTube, that is what had happened. In each of these cases, the copyright holder claimed that their work was posted somewhere without their permission, and thus was infringing on their copyright. ISPs such as YouTube must then immediately take down the work. They are not required, however, to investigate the merit of the claim of infringement. There have been many unintended consequences of DMCA that you will read about in the Unintended Consequences article in the readings. Make sure you understand the 4 major consequence categories outlined there. Also visit the Electronic Frontier Foundation's Takedown Hall of Shame. It has the most egregious current instances of misuse of DMCA, as well as some past notable cases. I'd like to highlight one of the misuses of DMCA by large companies such as Universal. They are using automated programs to scan the web looking for any of their copyrighted content. Their computer program then automatically files a takedown notice with the ISP. The ISP then, to protect themselves from liability, removes the copyrighted item. So no human actually makes the determination that something could indeed be fair use. This concludes this module's lecture. Your discussion for this module consists of 5 hypothetical situations. You're going to be evaluating each of them according to the 4 fair use factors and determining which factors are favorable to fair use and which are leaning to infringement, and then overall determining if you believe that the use is fair or unfair. Note, you're purposely not given all of the details in each of the cases so that you can explore what would happen if, for example, condition A was happening. What would happen if condition B was happening? So please keep that in mind when you are going through the scenarios.